Welcome Randy Domino from Commvault. He's going to talk about data management, digital transformation in the cloud era.
Roger, thank you. It's almost like you've seen this presentation or a piece of it before, how you set this up. So, welcome. And we'll talk about digital transformation, and which is really a big name for helping folks move to the cloud, taking advantage of the cloud, and still managing their overall enterprise. So I'll do a number of slides, and I'll wind up probably with about 10 or 15 minutes of live demonstrations after actually using the cloud as both a target and as a compute resource. So a little background, I'm the chief technologist for our Windows products and on our Microsoft partnership overall at Commvault, but I'm really known as two things. One, I'm the old guy, because I've been at Commvault for going on 23 years. Also known as the hockey guy. And unfortunately, I think the room's a little too large. We'll take some questions and answers at the end, but usually I like to have interactive sessions whenever possible. So let's talk about managing data and how it's driving transformation. Now, I've been in the industry long enough so I can say this. I don't know how many people in the audience will recognize the picture or terminology called SNA, or active-active and active-passive. A couple of people are shaking their heads, yes, so that's good. So in the old world, we had all the data in one place on mainframes. And this was 20, 30 years ago. And the discussions in the IT organizations was active-active, remote offices and data center designs, et cetera, et cetera. And that was sufficient. And since we're in the state of California, to borrow a phrase from Disney, we're now in a circle of life. We've come full circle, where the cloud has really replaced the mainframe for a main repository of data and compute. And the terminologies for the IT teams have changed to multiple region designs, multiple cloud providers designs, because it's something very common aspect we've seen is people having multiple clouds like Amazon and Azure at the same time. And hybrid, with a lot of, if not most of the data still residing on-prem as we help customers move to the cloud and move their workloads to the cloud. So we're going to talk public cloud, we're going to talk private clouds, all right? And here's a sample picture of one of our customers. Yep, we have a private cloud. We were there, had a meeting, took a picture of it, and that was their definition of a private cloud. Big honking mess of wires and a big honking bunch of racks. But it is their private cloud and where they stored a lot of data. And the data management requirements there were just as important if it was in a pristine-looking public cloud setting or a lot of data on-prem. So, a little background for Commvault. We support about over 30 different cloud technologies. We got a lot of experience with it. All right, we've seen the great, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Stop by the Commvault booth. We'll go into more specific stories. We'll give a couple of examples in a little bit as well. And this is using the cloud as a storage target, using it as a full compute environment for data management, as well as other application resources being used, and full VMs, where we can take VMs on-prem, put them into the cloud for hot spare standby, maybe move the workloads to the cloud for more optimization and use of the data. And also a little experience on who we believe is open and who we believe is actually really just selling their own stuff to drive their own cloud technology. Because there's a term that's kind of come back, if we borrow a phrase from the mainframe days, called vendor lock. And that's starting to creep into the cloud space as cloud becomes more and more relevant. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we proceed. So we have a perfect storm of data, and that's because, as Roger mentioned, there's a lot more things that are creating data that has to be managed. So back in 2003, for every 7 humans on the planet, we had 1 internet-connected device. There was a bunch of us in the industry 15, 20 years ago. We all had a laptop and thought we were really cool. 2010, we actually crossed the 1-to-1 threshold. For every human on the planet, there was 1 internet-connected device, whether that was a phone, laptop, tablet, et cetera. Last year, 3-to-1, and shortly, for every human, there will be 7 internet-connected devices. So a lot more things creating data that has to be managed. And we have a lot more compliance and a lot more guidelines for storing that data and finding it than we did 5, 10, 15 years ago. So how do we do all this? We'll give a couple of suggestions as we proceed. Talk about another example for devices. All right, there's a device, 1 internet-connected device, plane in the air. So we start off, there's about 400 internet-connected devices to start with. And those are all the humans in the plane, because we've all spent $29.95 for a 6-hour flight to get internet connectivity, and we're all internet-connected devices on a plane. But there's two very special internet-connected devices which are sending and receiving data constantly, which are fine-tuning and actually tuning up as the plane is in the air, and those are the two engines. So another example of a lot of data coming into a resource, real time, creating analytics, creating data that has to be stored for a long period of time. So companies, organizations, engineers can optimize the use of the information they're getting. Another example is we go into the farming industry. Not necessarily initially thought of as high tech, but so how has the farming industry changed? Well, let's take our old friend Sally the cow. All right, it's been about 30 years since Sally was part of a computer presentation, but we got a lot more data now just as a result of Sally. So 10 years ago, we just cared if Sally gave milk and maybe tracked how much milk Sally gave. But that has changed as digital transformation has changed the farming industry. Because now the farmer knows where Sally goes, where Sally eats, when Sally eats, and even what Sally eats, so they can fine-tune where to put the feed on the ground to more optimize that. They can optimize the better locations for Sally to go, for Sally to give more milk. All data that's being analyzed, all data that's basically part of the digital transformation we're seeing. Now you see the GPS-connected device hanging from the cow's neck, but you also see a medical device right on the cow's neck, and that is actually monitoring the cow's health. So the farmer knows real time how the blood pressure, the pulse of the cow, how the cow is feeling. And much to Sally's dismay, some of the spontaneity in Sally's life is taken away because the farmer now even knows when Sally's more available to possibly make baby Sallys. So all this data, again, another example of an Internet of Things which has to be analyzed and has to be managed, has to be stored, has to be able to be searched, has to be able to be retrieved. So we've got all this data, and no matter where it's coming from, it's all important. And everyone has the most important data in their organization. It's all under guidelines of some degree, whether it's Freedom of Information Act, whether it's Sarbanes-Oxley, whether it's my organization has to retain email for 30 days, 7 years, 21 years. For example, in New York State, all newborns, the hospitals have to retain data for 21 years. So a lot more data from a lot more places has to be retained, has to be searched for. And we'll see some demonstrations of this shortly. So the more data, the more need for smart lights out management, all right? Eliminate vendor lock, all right? As the cloud technology and the cloud hosters grow, there's going to be a little bit of a vested interest for them to sell their own stuff. So a big question for you guys when you talk to your cloud vendors is how open are they? How much are they pushing their own stuff? How much are they driving you down a point where you may or may not be able to make a U-turn? How much vendor lock is being introduced as part of your digital transformation? You'd like to try to reduce the number of technologies used as you make this transformation. That'd be a good thing. And by the way, when you put data in the cloud, or it's even on-prem, honestly today, with the amount of places the data is coming from and the amount of different types of places the data is coming from, if the content is not searchable, it's a lot more difficult to do things with it and do proactive things like analytics. So Commvault did something different. We designed a data management solution. And we honestly partnered with Microsoft way back when. And that partnership was to use, at the time, Windows Server as our foundation, a single standard product, standard environment for heterogeneous data management. And our job is to provide features way above and beyond what a normal vendor would provide in the box. And I'll give some examples of that and some demonstrations of that shortly. Microsoft gains a partner for heterogeneous, storage agnostic, enterprise data management. And I wish I could say we were smart 17 years ago and said, hey, cloud is coming and that's going to be the cool thing. But those Windows Server optimization that we've had for a decade, we could really take advantage of as the cloud started to come into more of mainstream. And basic Windows Server environments were available for us to run and do some of the way cool things we do. So what that left us is this, for example, and a very different philosophy from Commvault compared to other vendors out there. And for the folks taking pictures, if you want a copy of the deck, I'll be happy to give me your card afterwards. I'll give you the deck so you don't have to take a picture of every single slide. I've been in the audience too, taking pictures of everyone's deck, so I'll just try to save you from that hassle. Happy to give you a PDF version when we're done. So different vendors out there, some of their philosophy has been, let me go out and acquire different disparate technologies, all right? So the IT team needs backup, recovery, protection, archiving, encryption, dedupe, ransomware. All right, many more places that my data is running, many more places to be accessed by good people and not so good people. So ransomware is now a standard part of the IT team's organization, whether that data originates on-prem or it originates in the cloud. Encryption, deduplication, very important, especially as pertains to cloud. So some vendors' philosophies are, let me use different dispart technologies, or even go out and acquire different dispart technologies. Commvault took a very, very different approach many years ago, building on that foundation, where we say very simply, use Windows Server as a foundation, which can still push and pull data to the cloud and manage data on-prem, or use Azure Compute to run the entire product, or AWS to run the entire product, in which we deliver a single best-of-breed data management solution across the board. And that's best-of-breed for backup recovery, for archive, for e-discovery search. So a very different concept where you have a single product doing a lot more things than the other individual point products are doing, much more efficient, much more cost-effective, and again, we'll give some demonstrations of that product shortly. So let's define data management, because a lot of buzzwords up there, because backup and recovery can mean just let me restore the machine I have back to the way it was. And I think it's a little more than that. It's granular recovery. It's managing microscopic pieces of data like individual emails or Active Directory objects and attributes or Lotus Notes documents or messages. So can you manage individual little piece parts or versions of files just as efficiently as you can manage entire servers? All right. Virtualization. Are you taking advantage of virtualization so you can use the cloud for a virtualization disaster recovery as a service? And how do you, if you have VMware, can you move to Azure VMs very easily or AWS VMs? Or can I do a VMware to Hyper-V? How's that migration going at the virtualization? Or are you locked into a specific type? How much flexibility do you have? Compliance, government archiving. If I asked a couple hundred people that are in the room, what's your definition of archiving? I'd probably get about 195 different answers. All right, it could be e-discovery and search and compliance. It can be archiving for space management. All of this fits into the Commvault definition of archiving. I called specifically out Office 365. How many folks here have used it or a company is going to O365 now? All right, about a little less than half the room. Question I ask you, if you have e-discovery and search requirements and you have O365, what's your answer? Now, there is some capabilities within O365 to do that, but I like to ask a lot of IT organizations, do you have an O365 e-discovery requirement, or do you have an enterprise-wide, storage-agnostic, heterogeneous e-discovery and search requirement? Well, unanimously so far it's been I have an enterprise-wide search. So Commvault can take that O365 search and index it and instantly marry with everything else on-prem, whether that's Microsoft-based, Unix, Linux, Mac, et cetera. Provisioning. Can you automatically provision VMs when you're moving them for disaster recovery as a service or using managed services? Analytics and intelligence, and this is a key one. We're all here talking about cloud, and I think Roger's got the CloudEXPO for the next 2, 3, 4 years is going to be the way cool thing to do. But I think in about 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to see creeping up is the Analytics Expo, because it's one thing to move data to the cloud and use it as a storage target so I can recover it. It's one thing to do that for long-term storage. It's another thing to move data that is already indexed and do some analytics and make that data warm once it's moved to the cloud. And that's going to be the next phase. So it's one thing to get the data there, but if it's not indexed, you can't do too much with it. And that's a key differentiator, especially with Commvault. Ransomware, we just put it as part of our product now. We'll let you know if there's squirrely things going on from possibly outside sources. Managing the endpoints is important. And maybe one of the key most important questions you should ask every single one of your cloud technology providers and pieces of software that are integrating with the cloud are two things. Encryption, how is that data being protected? All right, we decide to use a methodology where the encryption key, we encrypt the data, we keep those encryption keys on-prem, which makes Azure or Amazon a compliant ready target straight out of the box, and you manage the FIPS compliance right out of Commvault from the encryption key perspective. Second part of that is deduplication, because there are still laws of physics connecting data. We always don't have 10 base T and 100 G from our office to our cloud devices. So deduplication becomes very important. And I say dedupe because if I have lenny.ppt 500 times in Exchange, 1,000 times in SharePoint, and maybe on 500 file shares, Commvault will move that data once. So you can start talking about tens and hundreds of terabytes moved to the cloud when you may only move 1 to 10 terabytes. So deduplication and global deduplication becomes a very important factor to think about when you're integrating with cloud. So I like to say we have the best product. Gartner has reaffirmed that now 6 straight cycles. Over 7 years, actually, our marketing department is using slide rules and abacuses to see if there was ever another Magic Quadrant where the leader was that far in front of the other players in the industry, and a lot of recognition from Microsoft as well over the last several years. So even in a perfect world, as you roll things out, the best way I can say it is stuff happens. And how do you protect to that? Honestly, I've used the PG version today, but stuff happens. You can't get a file, you can't get an email, you can't get access to something. What do you do? I implore you, next time you're on a browser, to go to Google or go to Bing and just put in the term cloud failure. All right, new technology here, all right, and everything's moving rapidly, and there are more updates and more functionality and features coming out shortly. But if you do that, you're going to see some really bizarre stuff. So do you have access? This is pulled recently. Matter of fact, I did this today. I did it last night in the plane coming here. And the only thing that changed there was 2014 went to 2016. So try it, take a look at it. Also, we had an experience with a company called Nirvanix. We had several dozen customers using that high-speed, way cool capability to Nirvanix. And we got a phone call one day. How you doing? Got several dozen customers using our hosting devices. We just want to give you a heads up. In about 2 weeks, we're shutting off the power, turning off the lights, and going out of business. We had to really quickly move folks. Actually, shout out to Microsoft because they actually gave us some pit stop locations to move a number of customers into Azure. But here was a hosting company that just decided they're done. No re-entry point, no U-turn. Good luck to all the customers. And we helped get them off. We helped get those customers off. So there's lessons that we've learned in the cloud technology. Access, internet connectivity sometimes causes issues. All right? The best way I can put it, there is now a subculture out there that is just dedicated to finding down situations as it pertains to clouds, whether it's a gaming system, whether it's a cloud technology, whether it's an Office 365 scenario. If you go to downdetector.com, you'll find several different places that they are 7 by 24 by 365, just tracking the status on a worldwide basis if cloud access is available for those hosting guys. Phenomenal concept. I'd love to get the business aspect of how much they're making on the advertising, because it's becoming more and more relevant in part of an IT team's discussion is making sure and when the data is available or may not be available. So we've learned some things with Microsoft over all the years. And I kind of say lead by example. So we supported Azure for about 9 years. Actually supported AWS for 8 years. Lots of experience within Commvault of moving data to remote targets. We've used Azure ourselves in production for over 7. You learn a lot of things when you use the technology in production. Suggested question anytime you talk to a cloud vendor, what have you done? What has your experience been personally? All right, we use it from a tiered storage perspective, and more often than not, if you go to commvault.com, it's actually running out of Azure. We kind of turned that around for the last 17 years at Microsoft, a little tiny place called the Office Products Group, where they make Exchange and SharePoint and Office. They've used Commvault to the tune of about 12 petabytes. All right, perfect data management. If there was an issue, we'd probably on page 3 of the Wall Street Journal and probably the 3rd story on CNBC for not being able to recover data. But a lot of experience gained in these high-intense environments. How many in the audience have children? All right. I will give you this one to take home. It might be a boring 3 days for you, but this might be one story you can resonate, talk over at the dinner table. I'm very lucky I have 3 kids. 2 of them are actually NCAA gymnasts. And the first 2 days of school, they go through social media NCAA training. It's gotten to that level where social media and storing of data has gotten down to college athletes. Amazing. And the first 2 days, they tell them, do not get caught with a red cup in your hand on Facebook. It might cost you your scholarship. Do not say anything bad about another gymnast. Do not say anything bad about another school or a coach. It might cost you your scholarship. And they scare the living daylights out of these girls for 2 days, and every other NCAA athlete, that be very careful what you put out there. I then get to come back and say, okay, considering what daddy does in the industry, that might be a little bit of an issue if one of my kids got caught in a social media snafu. I then say, be very careful what you put in Xbox and Xbox Live. Because we've been protecting 200 million Xbox Live accounts, and I kind of tease them a little bit and say, we'll find out what you put in there, so be careful what you leave as a digital footprint in your DNA, even in your gaming scenario. So tracking this data and storing it has even reached down to the family level. So take the story home if you want to get your kids a little trained on social media, how they should behave. It hit my kids square between the eyes when they were told, like, this is the potential ramifications of doing some things squirrely online. And we learned about scale where we've already moved 20 petabytes of Microsoft data into Azure. So large scale, big honking examples. So use cloud to manage the heterogeneous, storage agnostic, new term now, poly-cloud enterprise. Use cloud as a tier of storage, use it as our compute engine, part of a hybrid environment, and especially taking the VMs for DR as a failover. So let me get some demonstrations. So here's email. And as I mentioned, I've been at Commvault a really long time, almost 23 years. So here's a message from a lady named Cami that I originally got in 2004 on Exchange 2003. And I'm going to tombstone it. I'm going to permanently delete it from my mailbox. So we'll take a look at how hard or how easy it is to recover that type of information. So here's the Commvault interface, the old-fashioned administrative interface. And I'll get to a more modern GUI in a second, but I'm showing the old-fashioned one for some of the folks who have Commvault here who have had it for a while. So I can manage every server, every application, every heterogeneous environment, every tablet, every device from a single location, and this would be worldwide management. In this case, I want to go into Exchange, and I want to browse. When do I want to see the data? From a week ago, a month ago, a year ago? And these screens are important because you'll see consistency across the board. So I'll go into my inbox. I'll go into, as the administrator, have access to all the mailboxes. I even get the Outlook extended compliance and e-discovery information like calendar items, contacts, conversations, et cetera, But I'll go into the inbox, do a reverse chronological sort, and there's the message from Cami. Make a restore request, say OK. So what I've asked Commvault to do, I'm connected to a little MiFi device. So I've asked Commvault to find a message in Randy's mailbox that was backed up on Exchange 03 over 10 years ago. It happens to be living in an Azure data center in US East 2. It's already been restored while I'm talking. Find it in US East 2, restore it into my current Exchange 13 mailbox. Could have been 0365 as well, where the release independence holds true there. And very simply and very quickly be able to microscopically recover individual pieces of email. So that's kind of Commvault's definition of backup and recovery. Right? And I call this the old-fashioned way, but that, as you saw, pretty quick, very simple. Release independence between versions of Exchange, and we used cloud as a target in which to recover the data from. Back to the top of my mailbox, we see a message here called skill card. So let's go to a more modern way, because a lot of times customers will say, this is great, and after a year they said, as an IT team, you made us a little too popular. People have found out how easy it is to recover individual pieces of email, SharePoint items, how quickly, is there a way to have users do this themselves? And we said, sure. We have a virtual repository out there. We call it Content Store. And it gives me the option of having every single email, including the ones deleted, available to me as an individual user. So I can find a message skill card, open it up, I can reply to it, I can forward it. I cannot delete it, I cannot edit it because it's an e-discoverable protected copy. But as an individual end user, I can take it, drag it into my current mailbox, in effect doing a user self-service IT recovery and search of an individual email. Go back into my current mailbox, and I should see two messages called skill card. And there they are. So the administrative way of doing it, and we give you the option for the individual end user to manage their own email in the same fashion. So cover Exchange, and we talked about enterprise data management. So let's jump into SharePoint. I'll start up SharePoint. It'll take about 4 or 5 seconds to start it up. Log in. So we showed how easy it was to manage individual little tiny pieces of Exchange. And we recover entire servers and entire applications just as efficiently. So here's SharePoint, and we'll go in this site, Commvault document library, and I'll delete the one about SharePoint. And since I'm from New York and not from the West Coast, you guys don't trust me, I'll delete it out of the recycle bin as well. So I'm back, and the one for SharePoint's gone. We'll come back to the Commvault interface, and now I want to manage SharePoint. I can do this at a site, sub-site, a farm level. But again, more often than not, over 90, 95% of the time, you have to recover individual little piece parts. So I'm going to browse and recover. Same interface. I don't learn something new because I'm managing a different application. I'll go in to SharePoint. I got a couple of sites loaded here. There's the Commvault doc area. Let me open up this one a little bit so I can see them. And there's the SharePoint one. Make the restore request. Do I want to go to the same SharePoint location or a different one? We'll watch the job controller and wait for that restore to take place. So in this case, I've asked Commvault to find an item in SharePoint. It was originally SharePoint 10, fire it back into SharePoint 13. And again, I'm using Azure as that tier of storage, which would be just as effective with Amazon or a number of other of the cloud technologies. But again, release independence, microscopic management of the data, and I still have disaster recovery as a service. I still have full virtualization movement and can manage my entire enterprise. The SharePoint item is restored. We'll come back to SharePoint. I have to refresh the screen. You'll see at the top, F5 says refresh. And there's the item for SharePoint back as it was. And release independence between the two technologies again. We'll give one more application demonstration before we get to some way cool stuff. At the heart of every environment is Active Directory. All right? I compliment anyone here who knows LDAP, because that is one of the toughest computer languages to learn, because that's how you modify Active Directory. It is hard, hard stuff. So we're trying to make it a little bit easier for folks. Here's my object, and I'm going to give myself a promotion. I'm actually going to change my title. Now, managing AD is becoming more and more relevant because of acquisitions in the industry today about how you move different folks around when 2, 3, 4 companies combine, and for folks moving within organizations or maybe have left an organization and have come back. So being able to recover these components are very important. So I'll give myself a promotion. I'm not going to be the chief technologist anymore. I am now going to be the Commvault Zamboni driver. Always wanted to drive one of those, never had a chance to. Played a lot of hockey, but never had a chance to drive a Zamboni. So we'll take a look at how difficult it would be to actually recover an individual item with an AD. Back to the same interface. Go into AD. I'll browse. Again, I don't learn something new because I'm managing AD now. Same interface. Every object, every attribute becomes very easily available to me to manage. Scroll down. I can recover the entire object with security ID information or just the single attribute. Now, for those who have IT teams very focused on managing AD, this probably saves them days, if not a week or two, to be able to recover at that kind of level. So we'll check AD. AD restore is complete. We'll come back to AD. I have to refresh the screen again. Scroll down. And unfortunately, I am no longer the Zamboni driver. The attribute's been reset. So in about 2 or 3 minutes, we saw Exchange, SharePoint, AD Live, very easily, very succinctly managed at a microscopic level, but still giving me full disaster recovery and being able to use cloud as a target. So where it all begins to come together is in search. All right, so I'm going to go into Chrome for a second just to show it's not all Microsoft. One of the things that's important is we give you the option when we back up data or we archive data, you can actually e-discover index it, so you can search for it. So I mentioned Azure a few times. So I'm simply going to search for the word Azure. This will be an enterprise-wide search within Commvault, including, I got to log in, including all of the on-prem servers, clients, applications. So we search for the word Azure, done. That's it. We'll give you substring match capability. So here we see this. Remember those data sheets I showed before in SharePoint? Here they are, found by, searched by content. So this makes administrative teams' lives much easier. It makes the IT, HR, legal folks' lives much easier. And I can also search based on attachments. So it may be an email. So here, for example, here's an email. I can open it up, and including the ability to search by content within the attachment. So giving you global enterprise-wide search on the data that's just been quote-unquote backed up or archived. And when it's indexed and it's moved to the cloud, you can now do analytics and a lot more proactive management of your data because it's been indexed as part of your quote-unquote backup. So how hard or how difficult is it to add Commvault or add a cloud target within Commvault? Here's the machine I'm working on. Click OK. And I want to add the cloud storage library. And we'll call it Azure for CloudEXPO 3. And as soon as you get your credentials from Amazon or you get your credentials from Microsoft, you can begin using cloud as a tier of storage with all the benefits of the application management that I showed you, all the encryption capability, all the global deduplication. Come along for the ride. So everything I've shown thus far is running on-prem, push-pull to Azure. We'll show one more demo before we kick off. So I'm going to connect to Azure right now. All right. I've connected in. We'll go to remote desktop connection, and we're connecting to the cloud. Now, if you remember that same Commvault product that I was running on-prem, I'm now running the same exact product. No difference. All right, no difference at all. It's the same exact bits that are running in the cloud that are running on-prem. I don't have to learn something new. I don't have to do anything different because I'm running Commvault in Azure or in AWS. And I can just as efficiently manage data on-prem with that copy of Commvault running in the cloud. So we give you the option, whichever best optimized, to leverage what your data management needs are as you grow cloud within your organization. So with that, finished on time. Usually, if there's time for Q&A, if you want to ask, happy to do that. Roger, or if we have to move on. Usually I like to take Q&A, or just send an email to any one of those aliases, and we're happy to add more.
He's going to be here, so please, you can approach him off the stage if you want, or you're on the expo floor.
Yeah, we're on it, yeah.
Tonight, so make sure you stop by. But please, if you have a question for him, approach him here. He wants to talk. He wants to know what your questions are, what your specific issues are. So with that, thank you very much. Didn't talk much about hockey. That's another thing that he does. That's good. So thank you very much, Randy.
Thank you.